something unprecedented is happening in MotoGP, and it begins with a silence. One of those heavy electric silences that settles over a garage when the data on the screen tells a story nobody wants to read. In that silence stands Toprak Razgatlıoğlu, the most fearless breaker of his generation, staring at a motorcycle that still doesn't know how to speak his language. Yamaha brought him here as the promise of a new era. Yet the moment he touched the V4, it whispered its doubts before anyone else dared to. And then Jorge Lorenzo stepped forward, not with nostalgia or softness, but with the precision of a man who has already lived the consequences of a bike that isn't ready. His warnings sliced through the optimism. Yamaha won't help you in 2026. Why would a legend say this to a rider on the edge of greatness? What does he see in the telemetry, in the behavior of the front tire, in the nervous heartbeat of a prototype still searching for itself? Why does he believe that Toprak, whose courage rewrote the laws of braking, may be entering the only season of his life where bravery isn't enough? There is a truth buried inside Yamaha's new machine, a truth shaped by torque curves, chassis harmonics, and the fragile dance between instinct and engineering, and it threatens to decide everything before the lights go out in 2026. And if Lorenzo is right, then the real danger isn't whether Toprak can adapt, it's whether MotoGP will let him be who he truly is. MotoGP in 2026 feels like a continent shifting beneath everyone's feet, with regulations tightening, engines shrinking, and alliances being rewritten faster than engineers can redraw their SAD files. Yamaha's long-defended inline-4 identity has crumbled under the weight of the 2027 rulebook, leaving the factory to sculpt a V4 it still barely understands. The paddock whispers that the shift began the moment the 75mm bore limit was confirmed, a little-known detail that silently killed the inline-4's future. Cameras follow Toprak as if tracking a comet, and he thinks quietly. Everything looks familiar, yet nothing feels the same. Engineers talk about torque curves and combustion windows while the atmosphere around them vibrates with a nervous electricity. Jorge Lorenzo, watching with that analytic gaze only champions possess, finally says, Toprak is a phenomenon, but MotoGP is a different universe. Talent is not enough when the motorcycle doesn't let you express it. The phrase lands softly yet cuts sharply through Yamaha's box. The paddock has become a glasshouse of expectations, every reflection showing a different version of the future. The new V4 hums in the background, uncertain, cautious, almost shy in its first steps. Aerodynamic appendages stretch outward like petals searching for light, trying to find balance in a world that punishes instability. Toprak studies them with the curiosity of someone reading a language he has not yet mastered. Teams rush to adapt to Michelin's final year before the Pirelli era, another layer of fragility wrapped around every decision. Conversations shift from speed to adaptability, from horsepower to survival. The entire grid behaves like a flock of birds sensing a storm long before it arrives. Toprak steps into this landscape with both magnetism and vulnerability, a man entering a symphony that hasn't decided its melody. Reporters feel the tension growing, as if the air itself were tightening around the story. And as the engines fire for the first test, the truth becomes unavoidable. He is walking into MotoGP at the precise moment it stops being predictable. In this fragile dawn of a changing sport, one sentence echoes louder than any engine rev. The universe he enters is magnificent, but it is not ready for him. Yamaha's reinvention began not with ambition but with necessity, as the incoming 850 cubic centimeters era quietly strangled the inline-4's remaining potential. Massimo Marigali confessed that the rulebook cornered them, forcing the factory into a V4 architecture they had resisted for decades. In the engineering offices, someone finally admitted that the old crossplane crank couldn't coexist with the new 75mm bore ceiling, a little-known detail that sealed its fate long before the public realized it. The mood shifted from tradition to survival, and Toprak watched the transformation with a thoughtful whisper in his mind. I'm joining them at the moment they're learning to walk again. Yamaha's test bench hummed with uncertainty rather than confidence, measuring vibrations they had never had to tame before. Meanwhile, KTM was already turning laps with an 850 cubic centimeters prototype, widening the gap before Yamaha even left the garage. Lorenzo, ever the surgeon with words, cut straight to the technical truth when he declared, that bike is still a prototype of a prototype. It's early, unstable, and nowhere near ready to show who he really is. Engineers exchanged glances because they knew he was right. The V4's torque delivery felt inconsistent, unpredictable in the first 30 degrees of throttle rotation. Its character behaved like a young horse that understood motion but not direction. Every update created another variable, and every variable reshaped Toprak's future. Mechanics whispered that the cooling system needed a complete redesign to stabilize thermal drift. Aerodynamicists struggled to harmonize downforce with agility, chasing solutions that remained always one step further. The motorcycle often idled in the garage longer than it rode on track. And yet, something about its early heartbeat hinted at potential hidden beneath the roughness. Toprak leaned over the fuel tank during a private test and felt the vibration of a machine unsure of itself. He told himself patience was part of the journey, though his pulse revealed both desire and doubt. The MotoGP paddock has seen rushed revolutions before, but few carried stakes this personal. In the twilight of the testing day, the V4 exhaled as if gathering courage, and the entire project felt like a fragile sculpture still searching for its shape. It was in that fragile moment that everyone understood. Yamaha wasn't reinventing a motorcycle, it was reinventing its destiny. Jack Miller's first laps on Yamaha's newborn V4 peeled away any illusion that the motorcycle was already competitive, revealing shortcomings that echoed like distant thunder across the paddock. The lack of horsepower hit him first, a hollow sensation on the straights where rivals would simply stretch away without mercy. Then came the weak initial drive, a flaw that reminded him uncomfortably of Yamaha's past struggles. Engineers noted that the early torque curve dipped by 3% at corner exit, a little-known but critical statistic that amplified Miller's unease. He rolled into the garage shaking his head, thinking quietly, "This thing wants to run, but it doesn't know how yet." The familiar acceleration issues returned like ghosts refusing to stay buried. Even the electronics, still raw and tentative, hesitated in the first milliseconds of throttle application. The data screens glowed with contradictions no one wanted to admit aloud. Lorenzo, watching from afar, sharpened the narrative with a surgeon's precision, saying, if Toprak had arrived 2 years later, the story would be different. But next season, he's joining them in the middle of the earthquake. His words carried the sting of truth that silence often tries to hide. The V4 felt like a musical instrument still searching for its tuning. Miller described the mid-corner transition as sticky, a sensation almost like stepping on wet paint. The chassis responded in fragments rather than in fluid intention. Toprak listened carefully and felt a ripple of worry beneath his excitement. The development team scribbled notes faster than they could make sense of them. Every test lap seemed to birth a new challenge. And yet, buried beneath the instability, there was a heartbeat of something promising. The bike trembled with the energy of a creature not yet aware of its own strength. In that fragile balance between frustration and possibility, a new truth formed around them. A machine that hesitates at birth can still grow into a legend, but only if someone survives its first storms. Toprak walks into MotoGP carrying the weight of a BMW chapter so triumphant that it reshaped the identity of an entire manufacturer, with 39 wins and 2 titles rewriting the limits of what their bike could be. The paddock still whispers that he didn't just ride the M1000RR, he reinvented it. BMW officials publicly insist the success came from synergy rather than singular brilliance, reminding everyone that a perfect pairing can make even the stiffest chassis dance. Yet a little-known detail lingers in engineers' notes. Toprak's braking inputs reduced fork dive by nearly 9% compared to any other rider, revealing a style no simulation had ever predicted. As he enters Yamaha's box, he wonders softly, can I reshape another machine, or was that magic only meant for one place? The expectations around him now feel sharper than before, almost metallic in their intensity. Yamaha hopes he will replicate the miracle on a V4 still learning to breathe. But the contrast between the environments is vast, like stepping from a resonant stage into an unfinished theater. Lorenzo captures the mismatch with a clarity that freezes the room when he says, Yamaha has always been a bike for precision, for flowing lines. Toprak rides like a fighter pilot. He needs a machine that obeys him under braking. The new V4 won't give him his weapons. Those words cling to the air long after he leaves. Mechanics glance at the brake data and see patterns that don't quite align with the bike's current behavior. Toprak studies the telemetry with the patience of someone reading unfamiliar handwriting. The weight of leaving a machine perfectly molded to him becomes more evident with each passing test. The new bike responds erratically to the aggressive decelerations he once used to dominate. It behaves like a piano slightly out of tune, capable of beauty but resistant to touch. Engineers scramble to adjust ride height devices and braking maps in search of harmony. Yet the gap between expectation and reality feels larger than anyone admits. And in the quiet moment before the next run, the truth lands with the force of inevitability. Leaving a kingdom is one thing. Building a new one from rubble is another entirely. Lorenzo's admiration for Toprak's braking mastery has always been sincere, yet his caution for 2026 carries a quiet severity that unsettles even seasoned insiders. He knows that Toprak's greatest gift lives in the invisible space between grip and collapse, where only the bravest dare to balance. A little-known detail hidden in Michelin's internal reports shows that their front tire begins to lose its optimal deformation range under the violent initial pressure Toprak naturally applies. The moment he learned that, Toprak whispered inwardly, "Will they let me be who I am, or will they force me into someone else's rhythm?" Yamaha's engineers share that same concern, aware that the V4's early geometry still resists deep load braking. The bike struggles to maintain composure during the final 5 meters before corner entry, the exact zone where Toprak usually performs his miracles. Lorenzo distills all this complexity into a single sharp truth when he declares, "And with the Michelins? Forget it. They don't allow his extremes. With Pirelli, maybe he becomes unstoppable, but not with what's coming in 2026. His voice carries the weight of someone who has lived inside Yamaha's DNA and understands limitations. The Michelin front rewards smoothness, not control violence. The V4 chassis still flexes inconsistently at peak deceleration, creating feedback gaps that hide information Toprak depends on. In the telemetry room, engineers squint at the spikes they cannot yet tame. Toprak studies the front tire temperature maps, noticing asymmetries that tell a story of restraint rather than expression. The motorcycle seems to ask him to soften what made him extraordinary. That contradiction flickers in his chest like a warning light he cannot ignore. The paddock senses that his adaptation will be harder than most predict. Even the echoes of his braking in the garage sound slightly muted, as if the bike resists his signature. The tension builds with every run, every adjustment, every unanswered question. And as the day closes, one truth becomes painfully clear. A rider built for the extraordinary is stepping into a world still shaped for the ordinary. Superbike's 2025 crash statistics revealed a paradox that still astonishes engineers, with Toprak logging only 2 falls in a season where he fought for victory nearly every weekend. Teams across MotoGP study that number obsessively, searching for the secret behind such impossible control. A little-known internal analysis concluded that his lean angle modulation varies by less than 0.4 degrees under braking pressure, a precision bordering on the surreal. As he walks through the MotoGP paddock, he admits to himself, "They want my courage, but they don't yet understand what allows me to use it." The Yamaha V4, in its current infancy, struggles to translate that precision into performance. Its front feedback fades in the final meters before corner entry, the exact window where Toprak builds his masterpieces. The team knows he can ride on a knife's edge, but the blade he's been handed is still too dull. Fans dream of immediate duels with legends, unaware of the mechanical resistance beneath the surface. Lorenzo silences those fantasies with chilling clarity when he states, "People expecting him to fight with Marquez immediately are dreaming. Not because he's not good enough, but because the structure around him is not ready." A lion in a corridor can't run. His metaphor strikes with the force of truth because the Yamaha limits the very instincts that make Toprak extraordinary. The crash record becomes both evidence of genius and a warning of how easily that genius can be contained. Engineers scramble to widen the corridor, adjusting fork oil levels and refining pressure limits to keep the front end alive under his demands. The machine reacts with fragments of improvement, but never enough to unleash him fully. Toprak feels the tension each time he leans into the unknown, searching for the freedom he once commanded effortlessly. The paddock watches, torn between admiration and unease. His potential radiates through every movement, but the bike swallows part of it before it reaches the asphalt. Each test becomes a battle not against danger, but against confinement. And in that contradiction, the season's looming truth begins to take shape. The world wants to see him fly, but first someone must open the sky. Toprak's first true outing on Yamaha's V4 revealed an array of ergonomic and mechanical frictions that no amount of optimism could immediately smooth. The riding position felt alien, tilting his weight in ways that disrupted his natural rhythm. The engine braking map resisted his instinctive deceleration technique, shaping a barrier where he once carved openings. A little-known detail buried in the test data showed that his preferred braking pressure peaked 11 milliseconds earlier than the V4's current stability range. He sat quietly on the pit wall afterward, thinking, "My body knows what to do, but the bike doesn't understand the language yet." The front-end sensation remained unsettled, pulsing with inconsistencies that blurred the subtle feedback he depends on. Technicians circled around the machine with urgency, noting that only one development chassis limited the speed of experimentation. Even adjusting lever travel felt like sculpting a statue from mist. Yamaha initiated the design of custom clip-ons, hoping a shift of mere millimeters could restore a piece of his confidence. Lorenzo observed this process with the patience of someone who has lived its complexity and finally said, "Give him 1 season. Let Yamaha learn him, and let him learn the bike. That's when we'll see the real Toprak." His words struck the garage with the weight of prophecy. Telemetry screens flickered as if unsure how to interpret a rider this extreme. Every problem solved revealed another hiding underneath. Mechanics exchanged knowing glances, aware that great transformations rarely begin smoothly. Toprak climbed back onto the bike with the determination of a man stitching two worlds together. The V4 responded in hesitant variations, sometimes cooperative, sometimes defiant. He tested its limits, feeling the gaps closing one heartbeat at a time. The air inside the garage thickened with effort, frustration, hope, and mathematical precision. Each run became a conversation between a rider and a machine still learning to trust each other. And when the engine shut down at dusk, one truth remained undeniable. Great partnerships aren't born, they are built in the quiet hours when no one is watching. In the dim light of Yamaha's engineering room, the truth of Toprak's arrival becomes clearer than any press release could admit. The factory did not recruit him for immediate glory, but for the deeper transformation required by the 2027 regulations. Engineers whisper that his telemetry reveals torque management patterns no algorithm had predicted, a little-known detail that convinced Yamaha he could redefine their V4's core behavior. Jack Miller views him as the missing data point, the anomaly capable of reshaping the motorcycle's identity from its very foundation. Toprak senses this weight and thinks softly, "I'm here to build something, not inherit it." The team studies every inch of his braking traces like scholars decoding an ancient manuscript. His aggressive inputs expose weaknesses in the current chassis, while illuminating strengths the engineers didn't realize they had created. Yamaha understands that only a rider of extremes can push a concept into maturity. Lorenzo captures this delicate truth with razor precision when he states, "Yamaha didn't bring him for 2026, they brought him to shape 2027. The Toprak storm arrives 1 year later than the contract. The words echo through the paddock, reshaping expectations with their honesty. The 2026 season becomes a bridge rather than a battlefield, the year defined by learning rather than conquest. Every lap he completes feeds the architecture of a future machine. Yamaha adjusts R&D priorities around his sensations more than around lap times. The bike evolves piece by piece, almost shyly, as if growing into the rider it hopes to serve. Toprak embraces the role with a quiet determination that feels heavier than any trophy. The collaboration becomes a slow dance between ambition and patience. Those watching from the outside may miss the significance of each subtle breakthrough. Yet inside the factory walls, the storm Lorenzo speaks of is already forming. And as the final test day fades into silence, one truth hangs above everything. Some seasons are not meant to crown a champion. They are meant to forge one.